With the boom of artificial intelligence models, have you ever thought about integrating models like ChatGPT, Llama, or something similar into your applications, but feel that designing interfaces for a great user experience isn't your strong suit? Today, we're going to explore the .NET MAUI AI Prompt control, which is perfect for creating interactive experiences where users can communicate with an AI model of your choice and receive automatically generated responses. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more about .NET technologies, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Let's get started. Welcome to a new video on this channel. My name is Hector Perez. I am a Microsoft MVP, and today we're going to explore this control called .NET MAUI AI Prompt, available through Telerik UI for .NET MAUI. The main purpose of this control is to integrate artificial intelligence, giving users the experience of communicating with AI or generating various responses through text inputs based on what the user wants or needs to know at a given moment. It's a very useful control that looks quite good and provides the visual structure. We only need to fill in the commands and properties to maintain different states of the control, such as input text, output text, among other features. This is the control we are going to explore today. I have created a new project in Visual Studio 2022 for this purpose. It's the project you can see on the screen. This is a completely clean project. I haven't touched anything, so you can see how to implement this control. The first thing we will do is add to this project. We're going to indicate that we want to search for a series of controls, or rather, a series of NuGet packages. The first package I am interested in is the Telerik UI for MAUI, allowing us to include the control as part of our XAML code elements. So let's install this NuGet package. Once we have installed this package, we will also install the MVVM toolkit. Lastly, we will install a package called Betelgo AI. This is the term I'll use to find the package. It's called betelgo.openai, which will allow us to connect to the Azure OpenAI service. Although we have a specialized package available to use Azure OpenAI directly in our applications, unfortunately, this package does not work in an Android application. For this specific demonstration, I will use this NuGet package. Ideally, you would use an external service or an API to get different results. In my case, I will do everything within the same application solely for demonstration purposes. Once we have these three packages ready, we can start playing with the control. How do we do it? Let's go to the main page.xaml file, the one you see on the screen. I will add a couple of namespaces. I will place them here. The first namespace will allow us to use Telerik controls. The second namespace is for the NuGet package from the MVVM toolkit we installed. Once we've done that, I will replace the current content with pre-created content, so you don't see me writing all this code. First, I add a grid that will be the main container. I use a scroll view because the set of responses generated by this control can accumulate. Therefore, we need a way to view all these elements. In this case, I chose a scroll view. Inside this grid is the control we are interested in, called RAT AI Prompt. We have some default properties, or the minimum properties needed for this control to work properly. I also added a name, though it's not used in this demonstration. But the three important properties are input text. This property allows us to handle the user's input text to make queries to an AI service. In my case, it's bound to a property called input text, which we will create soon. We also have a second property called output items, which is bound to output items. This property allows us to keep a list of different responses we receive from the AI, so we can, for example, compare one response against another and perform different tasks, basically maintaining a history of AI query responses. Lastly, we have this property called prompt request command, which essentially triggers the action of querying the external AI service to generate a response and store it in output items. This command is actually a method. As you can see, it ends with command. Once we have this, we also have a grid here that allows us to show the user that a task is being performed and to indicate when it is finished. We will show and hide this grid using a property called showLoader. Once this is ready, since we are using bindings, The next step is to create the view model, where we will place all these properties and commands. So, as part of the project, I'm quickly going to add a new class. Let's call it ViewModel, for example. This class will have this characteristic that you can see on the screen. It is a partial class, so we can inherit from observable object and make various assignments of properties and methods as part of this class. The next step is to add the various properties of interest, or those we declared as part of the XAML file. So I will paste here a section of code to avoid having you watch me type it all out. These are essentially a set of observable properties that will handle the background machinery, allowing us to use the properties in the XAML code without needing to worry about firing any update notifications to the UI. The first property is input text. We also have a list of responses that we can store, the history of AI responses. Here, I'll remove this property since we don't need it yet. I have also declared a property called showLoader that will allow us to show the user that something is happening behind the scenes. Once we have this code ready, I will import a couple of classes as part of the project. These are the classes. The first is called Azure OpenAI Service, which basically contains a set of methods and features that will allow us to connect to the service, specifically Azure OpenAI. Here, I specify some client features, such as wanting to use the Azure provider, an Azure key, an Azure endpoint, and the deployment ID, which is the name of the deployment. It's shown here on the screen. The second class is called Constants, which contains information about these constant properties. For security reasons, I have kept this file separate to store this key privately. I also have a method called getResponse, which receives a prompt. Basically, it creates a set of messages. You can see here that we specify how we want the response from the external Azure OpenAI service. We indicate that we want it to speak as if it were a .NET MAUI robot. Here we give examples of how we might ask a question and how it should respond to us. Here, we give it a template for how it should respond. Finally, we give it an instruction, which is the prompt that the user will input to receive the information. But, in this case, if the response is satisfactory, it simply returns the content of this message. It's a straightforward method, but it will serve us in making various queries. It's worth mentioning that you could use another external service here. You could use a service like OpenAI, a meta service, for example, or any service you want. This is where you will create your methods to query the artificial intelligence. So let's go back to the view model. Or better yet, let's go back to MAUI program, which is the section where we need to register the service we just added as part of the project. So let's go to mauiprogram.cs. I'll add some lines here after this endif. Here, we add references for the dependency container of main page and the view model. And we also add a singleton reference for the Azure OpenAI service to use later through dependency injection. Also, as part of this class, I'll add, as part of the builder, this use Telerik method, so we can use this control we want to test as part of the project. Once I've added this as part of the MAUI program, I'll close this class. I'll return to the view model. In the view model, I'll add one specific field of the Azure OpenAI service type. I'll import the necessary namespace. I'll also create a constructor with the signature you see on the screen. Basically, an instance of Azure OpenAI service is received here, and we assign this instance as part of this class, so we can use it throughout the different methods. Finally, I'll add a command that will allow us to perform the operation. Remember that in mainpage.xaml, we have this command, which should allow us to execute it. Or query the service, in this case, artificial intelligence. So we have this signature, and we have the name execute prompt request, which matches the name we specified in the binding. Here, what we do is start or show that black overlay layer that will appear over the different elements. We have a response here after calling the getResponse method, passing in the text that the user enters as part of the control. Subsequently, we create an object of type AI prompt output item. This is very important because this object will contain the information to be displayed in the graphical interface, showing three characteristics. The first is the title we want to assign to that specific card. In this case, we will indicate that all cards will have the text generated with AI. Input text is the text that the user has entered. Response text is the text that the user will receive as part of the AI's response. In this case, we will simply take the response, which is the answer from the Azure OpenAI service, and display it as part of this response text. Additionally, as part of output items, which is the list of different elements we declared earlier as responses, we insert output item. We also clear input text so the user can enter a new query if needed. Before we can test our application, we need to set up the application's flow to inject the Azure OpenAI service correctly, starting in the app.xaml.cs file. So let's go to the app.xaml.cs file. Here it is. What we will do first is change this constructor to one that looks like the following. Here, we basically inject or allow the dependency container to inject a reference of main page, which we assign to main page. Once this change is made, we will go to main page, specifically to mainpage.xaml.cs. This is because we will inject the view model reference here through this definition that you can see on the screen. We simply inject a reference of the view model and assign it to the binding context. I will take the opportunity to remove this code that is causing us problems and that we don't really need. And finally, let's start the application on the emulator to see how this control we've added looks. Once the application is deployed, you can see that we have this control implemented as part of the application, and it looks quite good. Here, we can already make some queries like, for example, what is .NET MAUI? Let's press the button that says Generate. You can see that the request is being processed. After the request is processed, we see the response directly from the Azure OpenAI service. Here we have a response in the format we indicated, and we see the text explaining what .NET MAUI is. So we can see that this works correctly. We can make an additional query, for example, who is Gerald Ferris Lewis? Let's see if the AI knows who Gerald is. Okay, and here we have the definition of who Gerald Ferris Lewis is. Notice that a very important thing here is that the history of different queries is maintained throughout the application's execution. Now, at the bottom of each card, you can see a set of different buttons that currently do not perform any specific action, but we can manipulate them to perform actions. For example, copy or assign a rating level to each response to rate how good each response was. So how can we do this? Let's go back to the view model. We will return to mainpage.xaml. Where we have defined the RAT AI prompt control, we have a set of different properties that will allow us to manipulate this set of buttons. The properties are the ones you can see on the screen. Output item copy command, output item rating change command, and output item retry command. All have very descriptive names, and you can see that each of these properties refers to a specific command, meaning an action or the execution of a method. So as each of these properties is a command, we will bind to different commands that we will clarify below. Let's go back to the view model. After this first command we specified earlier, I will add a set of relay commands that will enable us to handle when the user clicks on each of the buttons. First, we have a method called copy, which will allow us to copy to the clipboard each of the responses generated or selected as part of one of the cards. We also have a button called retry, enabling us to re-execute the query based on the user's input. This aims to generate a new response if the user did not like the initial one received. Here, we could perform different tasks like deleting the card the user didn't like and generating a new one. But in our case, we'll simply re-execute the command to add a new card as part of the responses or history. We have a final command that will let us handle when the user changes the rating of any of the responses. Additionally, we will see which element was changed at a certain moment or which card was rated with a thumbs up or a thumbs down at a given time. Once we've made these changes, we will restart the application execution. Once the application is running, let's test these new functionalities by asking the question, what is Blazor, for example? Let's click on Generate and see if the AI knows what this technology is. You can see that it does know what the technology is. The advantage here is that we already have the functionality available to, for example, copy this text. You can see it was correctly copied to the clipboard. Correctly copied. We can rate each of the responses. For example, we give it a thumbs up, and we see here that the response for element 0 has changed with a rating of 1. We could also rate it with a thumbs down, which would have a value of -1. Or if we deselect the value, it would be 0. We can also click on the retry button to regenerate a response from the user's query. Notice that this is generating 2 new cards. The second one is a bit more descriptive. We could rate this response to process the evaluation or generation of these responses from the model we are using. In this AI prompt control, it is also possible to add a list of suggestions for users to give them ideas on what to ask. We will do this through a property called Suggestions. Let's see how it works. So let's stop the application execution. Let's go back to mainpage.xaml and locate the RA AI prompt control. As part of this control, we have a property called Suggestions, which we will bind to a property, a list of suggestions. In my case, it's bound to a property called Suggestions. Once we have added this property, let's go back to the view model. Let's go to the section of different properties to add this new property, which is a list of strings, and initialize this set of strings in the constructor. After initializing the Azure OpenAI service, we will create a set of suggestions to show the user what they could ask the AI in case they have no idea what questions to ask. That would be very useful if you had some kind of external artificial intelligence system that was tuned to provide responses related to a specific document, for example, and you wanted to give users some hints about what to consult and what the AI can't answer. With this simple change, we're going to start running the application. Ready. You can already see that we have some suggestions here that we can give to the user. Let's click on this first option, for example. Let's click on Generate. Notice that this information selected by the user has been placed as the initial instruction. Once we click the Generate button, this response is generated based on the suggestion we gave the user. Another functionality I really like about this control is that we can process the information after we get some results. For example, suppose we wanted to give the user the option to translate a text into Spanish that was generated by the artificial intelligence. Well, we could achieve this using the Command and Tab command properties. Like this. Let's return to the XAML file. Let's find our control. We're going to add this pair of properties to this control. The Command, Tab command, and the Commands property. You can see that the first one is the execution of a command. It will be a method you have as part of your view model that you can invoke to determine which command has been selected and execute the action according to that command. We also have a property called Commands, which is a list of the different commands you can have as part of the graphical interface, exclusively for executing an action after certain text has been generated. So, let's see how this works. Let's go back to the view model. I will go to the Properties section. And I will add a new property which is of type iList and has as a generic this object or this class of type AI Prompt Command Base. This is necessary because in reality, what we will have in this list is a set of different commands that we will be able to execute as part of this commands section. So once we have this property ready, I will modify the constructor a bit. After the list of suggestions, I will paste a line of text here. Basically, here what I do is initialize the commands property through a new list AI prompt command base. I'm also adding a new command directly to this list, and it is of type AI prompt command. Here we initialize some properties, such as image source. Here we specify that it will be a new font image source. We also specify a font family, a size, a glyph. We also have the option to specify the text, so the user knows what action this button will perform, which we specify in the commands section. Here, I have left you a comment on how you could add additional commands if you need to perform more actions besides the one I will show you in this demonstration. Here, I will delete this line as it is unnecessary. Once we have initialized this commands list with the commands we want to add to the commands view, we need to add the command we specified, called command tab command, which will be fired or executed once we select any of these commands. So, I will go to the bottom of the file. I will paste a new section of code that refers to command.command, which is the name we specified earlier. Here we receive an object or an argument called arc, which is of the type object. This reference of arc will contain the information about the command we are pressing. You can see that we perform a conversion of the specified command, the command selected by the user. In this case, there will only be one, but you could have more than one. You could compare each of the commands to perform different tasks according to the command selected by the user. In my specific case, I obtained the last element of the response list, or the history. This is to evaluate the response and specifically carry out a translation to Spanish of that text, which is part of the response. Once we've done this, we replace the content of the response card with the response obtained from the service and finish the execution of this command. Let's then run the application once more to see how this change looks. Okay, let's select the second option so we don't lose much time. We generate a response. Okay, you can see we have the response here. Let's indicate that. You can see we have this new section, this new window, where we have commands. You can see that this is a list where you could have more than one command. In my case, I only have this command to translate to Spanish. I click on the option. We wait for this action to complete. We return to the output window, and you can see that the text is no longer in English, but in Spanish. If you speak Spanish, you will surely understand this text appearing on the screen. Finally, what if we wanted to add this control so that the user can call it whenever they need it, or only when they need it? Well, the good news is that this control can also be converted into a floating button in the following way. I will stop the application execution and return to the XAML code. This task is really very simple. All we have to do is place an element that nests a RAT AI prompt of the RAT AI prompt button type. You can see that we have nested this definition we specified earlier. This RAT AI prompt button has some characteristics such as the content. In my case, this will not work because I don't have a source that matches that text. But here, you could have some text. Let's put, for example, AI. Font family. We have here Telerik font examples. In case you had a source from which you obtained the element or the icon from an icon font. We have here horizontal options and vertical options. Within we already have RAT AI prompt. With this simple change we've made, you'll see what change occurs in the graphical interface. Let's run the application. You can see the significant change that has occurred. We no longer have the control occupying the entire graphical interface window. Instead, we have it, in this specific case, in the bottom right corner. If we press the button, you can see how this floating button or control displays in quite a pleasant way. We can again select one of the options, for example, click on Generate. This starts the text generation process, or this processing to generate an output. We have here this card, which looks quite good. Here we have different horoscopes for each of the zodiac signs for .NET developers. We could once again translate the text we obtained into Spanish. Let's give it a few seconds. We return to the output. Perfect. You can see that we now have the text once again translated into Spanish. So this is how you can integrate and use this specific Telerik control in your applications. It's a versatile control that looks quite good and will surely save you a lot of time if you decide to use it in your .NET MAUI applications. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want more content related to .NET MAUI or .NET technologies in general, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. See you in the next video.